Hello everyone and welcome to the India-Japan Dialogue with Praveen Dogra. Today we have a very special guest under whose leadership I've had the privilege of working, and needless to say it was a very enriching experience. He is an alumni of IIT Delhi, International Christian University and University of Tsukuba, Japan. He is also very fluent in Japanese language, which makes it a very rare combination to have. He has more than 40 years of corporate experience, and out of which 30 years have been spent in top management roles like that of chairmanship, MD, CEO, and CXO. He has expertise of not only creating but running joint ventures between very large multinational companies of Japan and India. He truly believes that transparent ethical governance and people-centric management are the two most important pillars in building and sustaining profitable organizations. So without any further ado, let me introduce my guest today, Mr. Anil Gupta. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time today and meeting us today. And it's a pleasure to connect with you after a small gap, and I really look forward to hearing your views today at the India-Japan Dialogue, sir.
Thank you very much, Praveen. It's certainly my pleasure to interact with you.
Thank you, sir.
And I have always enjoyed every meeting with you.
First of all, sir, not only me, our viewers would also like to know, how did this journey start for you? How did you first got connected to Japan, its language and its culture? And don't mind me saying, sir, since you were in IIT Delhi, what perception we have is people from IIT usually look at West or the US as their destination of choice. So how did it all start for you, sir?
No, you are very correct. In fact, most of my colleagues during those days in the final year were all applying for US. And I was somehow not interested in applying anywhere. I wanted to stay in India. But after some time, I was kind of getting bored. I was working with BHEL for in this initial stages of my life. And then there is this award of Rotary Foundation that came in, which again was for going to US or UK or in any other English speaking country, because the country to which you go, you had to have the language of, you have to have the knowledge of the language of that country. That was the prerequisite. So in my case, I had applied and I was finally selected for the award. But then a letter came and they said that Rotarians from Japan were very generous in their contribution to Rotary Foundation. And this award is for international understanding and in developing culture understanding, international understanding and cultural exchange. So you are one of the 25 people we have selected for Japan for studying language as an additional 1 year.
So that came as a surprise?
That came in as a surprise, and I felt it was a very good opportunity to learn language. I could have said no and continued my normal award of 1 year.
True.
This was additional 1 year for learning Japanese language. And I was enamored with the Japan because the way it has progressed after the Second World War, and especially their car Toyota was catching attention worldwide at that time.
Really? So this was happening so in the late 70s or early 80s?
Early 80s.
Early 80s. So
just at 1980
okay.
It happened.
So at that time, India and Japan weren't really those countries which were closely connected at that point of time.
Yes, very little was known about Japan, though Japanese embassy had this cultural centers,
right.
So but very little was known.
So that was your first, let's say, tryst with the Japanese or Japan culture when you went to Japan for that award which
yes.
you received.
Just before going, I took a small program in the for understanding at the Japan Culture Center.
So the next question, comes naturally in the sense that you've had experiences and you have, as I said, not only created but you managed biggest joint ventures between certain IT companies of India and Japan. I mean, I really would like to know, and so do the viewers. what were the initial challenges which you faced, sir, while creating or even starting those talks of having those joint ventures between corporations in India and Japan? Because sir, I'm sure if you would agree with me, our value systems are similar, but our working style is very different till now. I feel there are certain gaps in our working styles, and you had actually got these two multinational companies together, and there are no small multinational companies. I'm really wanting to know, sir, how did you manage that? What were the challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
This is a little difficult question because my journey, a lot of learning about Japan and its culture happened after I finished this program and after I even came back to India. In around 1990, I got associated and formed a joint venture where I was one of the founder directors and with a Japanese mid-sized company. And I ran that company. It was in Oracle field, and I ran that company from 91 to 98. After 98, there were some differences in working style, etc. So I decided to move out. And then I joined HCL, which was a corporate, at that time it was a relatively much smaller entity. And between 2002 and 2005, I was asked by HCL, and right from the beginning in HCL, my role was Vice President Strategic Alliance, so Japan. So I was focusing on Japan only, and I was traveling to Japan every month. So that way, since 91 till before pandemic, I traveled to Japan almost every month, at least 11 times a year. And every visit would be a week to 10 days, not more. So that's how things started. And in HCL, I was asked in 2002 to go to Tokyo and create a joint venture and help bring Japanese companies and do something so that business with Japan grows.
Why HCL looked at Japan as a prospective
Because that was
country?
one of the areas. Japan has been very intriguing. Most Indian large IT companies have not been very successful in Japan. If you look at the HCL journey, the amount they grew outside Japan, which is primarily in US, and compared to that, the growth in Japan had been minuscule. So they were very much wanting, to grow. So I was kind of asked to do that, and when I went there in 2002 end, the 2003 beginning, within first 2-3 months, because of association earlier, we could have this MOU signed. One of the pretty large companies, multinationals.
But as you said, you had this sign, but I'm sure you must have faced challenges during that time.
Till signing of MOU, there was no challenge.
Okay.
Signing of MOU, it was pretty simple because the chairmen of the two companies had met, and it was kind of agreed to let's do something together. And I was the person who was asked to go and do something and work out the nitty-gritties. And within the first 2-3 months of interaction, we could come to a thing that let us have a MOU signed. After the MOU, to formation of the company, it took 2.5 years to make the company.
Wow. Okay.
Because both companies were big, both companies had their own strategic objectives, so they had to have a common ground. So there is something called what is a common ground and something what is the back of the thing. So one Indian company was interested in entering into the large Japanese multinationals market, and the Japanese company was obviously interested in trying to build its own strength. That was the what you call honne. And Tatemai was that one company wanted to give work, another one wanted to execute, so it was perfectly okay. So, and to match this on an agreement, it took us 2.5 years.
So one more important aspect of India and Japan are the working practices. I also am associated with Japan for the last 20 years and have been to Japan on scholarship and worked in Japan for 3-4 years as well. What are certain workplace practices in Japan as per you, which are quite different compared to that of India, and probably you would like to touch upon those practices and tell us how Japan works in certain aspects, sir?
You see, broadly, you cannot say some things are very different, but the thing is that the perfection to which Japanese follow certain things is different, and it is better. It's different when compared to anywhere in the world. So, for example, in a Japanese context, they do things meticulous planning. They spend a lot of time, sometimes 60, 70, 80% of their time in planning and ensuring that things happen perfect the first time. Then, so that is where India also does planning. We also do planning, but we are more attuned to agile kind of environment. Whereas, we'll make something, then we'll come back and we'll again do. Whereas Japan is traditionally more waterfall style of development. I'm using a software term, but then the whole approach is you make things perfect every step.
So basically, avoidance of risk is something which they are also.
Yeah, avoidance of risk is one aspect, and then the second aspect is which has to do with the client feeling. Japan feels it is very, in my opinion, it feels that it is very rude to put a product in the market knowing that it is not good enough. So you cannot, whether it's a software or it's a hardware, you cannot put a product which you know that there are a lot of bugs in it. So technically speaking, for a software product, it's approach of say Microsoft or even Apple, etc., where you come out one after the other versions, you keep coming up, and your product stabilizes only after a certain time, which in other words you are doing it at the cost of the client. This is something which is not very much appreciated.
So I guess they spend most of their time in planning so that the eventual implementation goes without any...
making a perfect product. And the quality has to be absolutely, perfect.
So to make a perfect product, what would you like to say about the concept of Kaizen then? How about their concept of continuous improvement?
Yes, so that is exactly the point is. The Kaizen concept, you make a product up to this level perfect and then go on continuous improvement. So this Kaizen is something which can be done in everything in Japan. So I am your friend, our friendship is so much, we can do Kaizen and we can improve. So between the two nations, you can continue to improve your ties. You can continue to improve your products. You can continue to improve your infrastructure. So it's nothing like a perfect. If you visit a Japan district or some say an office or any place, after 5 years to go or 4 years to go, you find it very different and much more improved. So there is a continuous working. So this concept of Kaizen is very, very key, so, as you rightly pointed out.
Then, sir, would like to also have your views on then being an IITian, sir. I mean, as I said, what about the IT engineers these days who are probably looking at Japan as an attractive destination to pursue their career going forward? Most of them might not even know about Japan, sir, but you are someone who is an IITian who's in touch with Japan. What would you think in terms of our IT relationship between the two countries, and what advice can you give to those IT engineers, sir?
You see, IT is a big demand. IT engineers are in big demand in Japan, and because Japan is short of younger generation. The population,
there is an old age problem, sir.
Population is aging,
yes,
and more people, as the society evolves, more people tend to look at arts and other things, whereas India still has a lot of focus on engineering and mathematics, etc. So IT is in big demand, and Indian engineers have a very good future. The only impediment at this point in time is the ability to communicate effectively, which means language becomes one part, because a lot of good part is that a lot of Japanese are now learning English, and they are trying to communicate in English. But at the same time, a lot of expertise in Japan, which is there in small and mid-sized companies, and the people there do not feel comfortable speaking.
So those knowledgeable people in Japan still feel comfortable in transferring that knowledge in Japanese language,
yes,
you mean to say?
Several Japanese, because in Japan you don't need English to do anything in Japan, unlike India.
So these IT engineers, sir, as you said, it is an attractive destination, and if they can learn a little bit of language, it would work, sir?
And for Indians, learning Japanese is not very difficult. because the grammar of Indian languages and Japanese is very
It
similar.
is similar, sir. That is true. So I think this is a good news for all the IT engineers who are looking at
Yes,
Japan
yes,
as a
definitely.
destination. And these days, I think Japan is also promoting to get more and more workforce into their country, sir.
Yes, very much. And but people are kind of slightly reluctant many times because they feel they may not be able to get good vegetarian food. There are a lot of myths around that. So more interaction, more getting to know each other, more knowledge about Japan and culture will definitely help.
India and Japan at the government level are working very closely. There is a strategic alliance between India and Japan. Our prime ministers visit our country once a year. And I think a lot of projects have been, sponsored by Japanese government in India as well. So at that front, I think we are doing quite well. However, I would like to have your opinion on the people-to-people exchange. One is that, and the work style of Japanese and Indians. What are your views on these two topics?
See, I typically feel that culturally there are a lot of similarities between India and Japan, but at the surface level, there are a lot of differences. Deep culture aspects, a lot of similarities, like we have respect for elders, we have, own giri, so there is a sense of reciprocity. So there are
Treating customer as God.
Treating customer as God. There is a lot of similarities. But what happens is when there is people-to-people interaction increases, then you understand all that. Plus, there is a lot of myth about Japan in India, which means that you don't know what to, you may not get to eat vegetarian food at all. Whereas this is not true. So I feel that more and more people should travel. Japanese government, if they can promote Japan more for India, and Indian people also go to Japan a little more. Most Indian friends of mine who have gone to Japan, they have come back very, very happy. At the same time, when it comes to working, at workplace, you see, Japan believes in perfection. They believe in no-nonsense approach. They believe in, that meeting all your commitments on time, every time. So there, we in India are a little more relaxed. We look at time in a very long continuum. We have a concept of reincarnation. So we don't see life as some 50, 60, 80 years, 50, 60 years of active working. We see life much beyond. But generally, the Japanese take things very time bound. You want to do, it's only research people who are allowed. Academic research is different, industrial research is different. Industrial research, they still work in 2 or 3 years time. For academic purposes, the time frame can be longer.
But sir, in day-to-day working, like you're saying, as you said, commit what you can deliver. Yes. And do not commit something.
You have to meet your promises. Every small thing has to be done. For example, I have a call with you, I say, okay, I'll send you tomorrow this presentation. And I have merely forgotten it. So this happens in India quite a bit. Whereas Japan would not, they won't remind you. If you don't send it, then they think that there is some intention behind why you are not sending it. So these things create unnecessary communication barriers.
So what we feel are small things are actually big things when you look at it from the Japanese point of view. So we should be careful of those little things while working together.
So that sensitization about Japan culture is very important.
グプタさん、今日貴重な時間をいただき本当にありがとうございます。最後の質問になりますが、ご存知の通り今年は日印国交樹立70周年の年となりますが、これから5年10年先は日印関係についてどういう期待をお持ちでしょうか。
そうですね。もう、今度繰り返して20年前を見ると。20年前にちょうど日本とインドのリレーションシップが、かなりどう言えばいいのかそんなに良くなかった、悪くはなかったけどもそんなに良くなかった、政治的にはあまりアラインスされてなかったんですね。それが今かなり進んできました。それで IT の観点で言うと、その時インドと まあ、米国アメリカとのリレーションシップのレベルがまあ、今日本とインドのリレーションシップ IT の観点で見ると、まあ、同じレベルだと。あの時、まあ、仕事さえあればアメリカに行けたしアメリカの仕事もできた。それでものすごくハイペースで、IT 関係が進んでいたアメリカとの間に。日本はもうこれからの時代で日本もインドの IT の力をまあ、認めてきましたし、まあ、いろんな小さい問題があるけどもそれを乗り越えていくことには間違いないと私は思っています。
まあ、IT 関係ではなくて政府関係でも経済関係でも結構今協力があるということですね。
そうですね。それが5年か10年後にはもっと進んでいくことにも私は間違いないと思っています。それで、まあ、かなり楽しみにしています。
なるほど、ありがとうございます。